Listen. So there's a lot of scary movies coming out alongside Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, including Hulu and Blumhouse's Into the Dark. So, pretty much everything's just getting really dark. So I figured I'd share a couple of my thoughts on some of them. Let me explain. So growing up, I didn't read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is what I'm going to start off with. I was living it. I swear I passed by La Llorona's house 12 times as a kid goofing off in Mexico. But this is considered to be one of the most censored books of all time, regardless of if it made it to your scholastic book fair. This thing has topped several lists since parents deemed them to be so violent that if it ever was made into a movie, they'd be rated R because of all of the graphic violence. Well, see, I'm not against something being PG-13. I don't want the unnecessary rated R gore just for the hell of it either, but when scenes were legit cut from a movie called Scary Stories because they didn't want it to be too scary, I don't know, But considering Tío Guillermo got the director of Troll Hunters to helm it, I knew it would look pretty good, and I do think the effects in the movie are the best part of it. I don't know about combining the short stories for a single narrative, if that was the best option. It felt more like Wish Upon and Polaroid, which I don't even know if that thing ever got released. I wish they would have just kept it as an anthology series, perhaps gone the route of a mini-series, and not only could have been creepier, but, you could have been freaked out at home in the neighborhood bully's car as a part of a crappy prank, and they feel euphoric about it. Until Tommy whoops them. Stella's also a part of the group, and she's been obsessed with writing stories ever since her mom left her alone to feed her dad minerals. So it's just been these three who have kind of been outsiders. The group befriends my cousin, who would be walking around with a switchblade, as they all go into this creepy haunted house where, legend has it, there was this really big family known as the Bellows, and they had a daughter named Sarah, who was treated worse than Harry Potter, to the point that they didn't even have pictures of her. Tommy the bully tries locking them inside the house. This doofus Chuck ends up in room 237, and before escaping, Stella decides to steal Sarah's secret scary stories. Like I said, the gimmick of an object causing torture because the script told a character to take it isn't my personal favorite. On top of that, I get that it's the moral of the story, but Sarah, your goofy ass was just as bad as your parents if you're taking it out on innocent kids just trying to break into Hollywood. That said, Hollywood only has room for one Timmy, and so it turns out that the book writes the story for you, since Guillermo really liked his book from Pan's Labyrinth and thought that would be a cool thing to showcase here. And so we get the story of Harold the Scarecrow, which sees Tommy get stuffed by that scarecrow as he consumes him, and I believe swaps places with him? I don't really know. This is the one that was skinned back a bit, so it wouldn't be too grotesque. The one where Augie eats the big toe, I just thought was stupid. Again, I love the effects for all of these, especially with this one where they have the performer Javier Botet, who I mentioned in the past. Man's a professional at what he does. He's been Slender Man, Keyface in Insidious, the Crooked Man in Conjuring. My man played a Xenomorph, and here he's great, but they had this girl looking like the Boyle kid from Fairly Odd Parents, and then in reassembling itself like it's Exodia. Even scarier is the contortionist doing way too good of a job at his job.
I want to point out that these moves are not done with wires or CGI. He can really move like that.
The cop in the movie, like a true American, tries to shoot it, but does nothing. Thing's pretty much invincible, considering it gets pinned by a truck, and this is again where they just fail in it. It's pinned by its torso, yet it could just dislocate all of its arms, and I guess the torso sets it free too. The effects were way too good for the story that they had in this movie. See, if you've ever seen a Del Toro presentation, you know that he uses these creatures to really just represent other things, from Catholicism to the Spanish Civil War to him winning an Oscar. The whole movie is a clear allegory for bad politicians, as we see with the overemphasis of Nixon, all the bullies, bad parenting, racist cops, pretty much alluding to the fact that our scariest stories aren't the ones that are fiction, but reality, and that the tales you tell end up defining you, which is why I guess they ended on a cliffhanger, since they wanted that tale to be a sequel. Overall, I think it's an okay movie. It's a rent it for me. I don't agree with it not being an anthology series, considering there's 3 books out already and another one to come. Each one has 30 stories in it. It's clear this series isn't going to be fading into the dark anytime soon. I just wish they would have put it on HBO or Netflix. So even though Guillermo thinks anthologies aren't the way to go because they hinder the success of it or something, these would disagree. Blumhouse clearly feels the opposite. They actually have an anthology TV series that's released monthly on Hulu. They're meant to coincide with the holiday for that month. So, there was a Halloween episode titled The Body that dealt with a hitman who accidentally ends up under wraps at a party after he kills someone. A Mother's Day one titled All That We Destroy that sees a mom creating clones for her son so that he can purge out his assassin-like urges. And of course Treehouse, surprisingly directed by Sean Spencer of Psych to coincide with the release of Captain Marvel. That said, I'm just going to cover 3 of the most requested ones that I've gotten with full spoilers, so here are the timestamps in case you don't want to know that they all die at the end of each one.
I'm just fucking with you, man.
Also, because I sat through this episode, and yeah, I am not a fan of like over 50% of these, so I'm just going to cover 3. So Pooka is directed by Nacho Vigalondo, who isn't a stranger to anthologies. He also did Colossal, which is similar to this in terms of monsters and themes. And I always laugh every time I search up Colossal because it always reminds you of this quote that he had where he didn't want to just make a Godzilla movie. My man wanted to be in the Godzilla suit. Anyways, here he directs the Christmas special, dealing with a struggling actor who signs his life away to be the person behind the Pooka mascot. Pretty much it's like that new Chucky doll. It's this new tech / pet thing that listens to you whenever it wants to, and then it repeats back phrases at random. It even has a naughty mode for some reason. They make dude do the OA dance, and then boom, he's cursed and becomes one with the suit, which is interesting because if you really look closely into it, Pooka's origins are actually found in Celtic mythology, but what's even more interesting is that the script to Pooka originates from the Ryan Reynolds-led Benioff written Stay. It's just pretty much a reskin. See, Wilson here, after selling his soul for the bag, asks this real estate lady named Melanie out and tries to befriend her son by beating up his friends at his party where he's dressed up as Pooka. In fact, he goes full Spider-Man 3 with this suit as it starts wrecking his place. It starts doing very much Stranger Things. It supposedly even threw his neighbor out the window Child's Play style.
You need to find who did this to her. Pretty sure I'm looking at that person right now.
This gritty 2.0 suit is really just a cover-up for some repressed guilt that he has, meaning that the entire episode that we've been watching is really just what this guy imagined in order to cope with what he did. Because like the Venom suit, you can see it as being representative of substance abuse and how this man was really addicted, because just like Pooka's random naughty mode, this dude had a temper, and on one of his outbursts with his family, it ended up getting them all killed.
Look at all the pretty lights.
And so he creates this reality based off of his kid's toy, where he turns his other victim into his roommate in order to live with that guilt. There's a reason he was quoting A Christmas Carol early on in the film, as he's being haunted by the ghosts of his past.
Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be only?
And I think if this is the first time you've seen a story like this, you may very much like it. I definitely do like the themes. In a lot of these Into the Dark episodes, I've just seen them done better in other things. I personally would recommend something like Happy over on Netflix instead. It even has the same exclamation point if that's what you're looking for. And while it does take a different approach to this type of storytelling, it's still very similar and I would say even more interesting. As for Pooka, simple stream it from me. Now, this one was actually my personal favorite because it reminded me a lot of the movie Ingrid Goes West, which I would recommend go checking out. It's actually written and directed by Sofia Takao, who's also helming the upcoming Black Christmas remake, and even starred in one of the VHS anthologies as well. Pretty much, this episode calls out influencers who come off as being positive when really they're just bullies. Let me tell you, I've been to enough festivals where influencers are so cheap, they try to swindle free stuff from booths for a shout out. Like, boy, girl, if you have a massive enough audience to call yourself an influencer, then you have enough to pay the good people for their services. Here, the character of Danielle doesn't just Chanel her inner James Charles, but her self-help channel is kind of ironic considering she pushed a girl named Kelsey into committing suicide. And so this girl's night out turns out to be a coup set up by these high school friends who are trying to ruin this bully's internet career. And y'all know how much I love to zoom in on my shots, but the show's editor knew how pulpy these scenes were. They just did it themselves. If you really pay attention to their stories, you realize that this episode is actually just like Mean Girls, but 10 years later, if these two decided enough is enough with Regina George. And while the message dealing with bullying is heavy, it's crazy to think how easily people can mentally be manipulated just because someone can abuse their influence. But that catfight at the end was still wild.
I'm fucking rich. Poor fucking loser.
Danielle's willing to kill to keep her secret, but Alexis wants to throw in more and sets up this crime scene in order to take Danielle's spot as an influencer, apology and all.
And I know she just want me to move through this and live my fullest life.
Now, before we get started, please make sure you're wearing your protective glasses and your latex gloves because this stuff is spicy.
And so far, I think it's the best episode of the series. Like I said, I would also recommend not just watching this one, but watching Ingrid Goes West. And if you like both of these, even check out Cam over on Netflix, which I think is the best out of all three of them. Overall, like I said, this is my favorite, and I can't wait to see Shane Dawson cover this. Besides Pooka, man, this episode was our second most requested, not just in the series, but like of a bunch of episodes. They decided to use the most American of all holidays and released a Border Patrol episode on July 4th.
Don't worry about what you've lost. Think instead of all that you've gained.
And I'll say, I really like the themes in this one that play out on the American dream. That said, I don't think it's as great as Get Out or A Better Life when it comes to the culture shock of the characters and how they find themselves in, which seemed to be something that a lot of people were hyping up. In fact, I would say the director's previous border crossing short, where they come across cannibals in the desert, is way more interesting than this Stepford Wives experiment. And it's not that it's bad, I just think that the Twilight Zone-esque style of the episode is really bombarded by its editing. Like, I get sensory horror, but like, I don't know. Pretty much, this is a good place-like experiment where the government has taken a group of immigrants and is running tests on them. Marisol, our main character, who was pregnant when the movie started, finds herself in like a TV series where everything is too perfect and restarts each day with a new dress until she breaks on through to the other side.
I'm not paying you to give them the American dream, Tom. We're paid to keep them out of it.
Pretty much, Creed compares this experiment of rounding up illegals as for-profit prisons. Again, I really like the premise of this episode, even if the experiment seems, less sustainable than the underground tunnels in Us, but it just had a lot of exposition and weird editing, way more than a Pureflix film.
Hey, Ricky. Hi. Come, children.
Like, I know they say show don't tell, but I don't know what you're showing me. Overall, the message is pretty clear, and I get the Westworld Purge-like experiments, playing a Black Mirror-like play on how absurd these situations can get. Maybe it just would have been better as a short and not a 90-minute episode. I think there are a lot of great movies this year that are tackling this subject from various angles that I would suggest, but as for this one, I would also have to give it a stream it. Other than that, there are more coming out since, again, it's an anthology show, so I'll probably be doing another video in the future breaking down whenever another good one comes out. But seeing as the new ones are thinking outside of the box and are tackling school spirit, which coincided with the first day of school, all I'm saying is that Hulu better have the balls to give us a Black Mirror streaming episode in November when the mouse starts taking over. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know your favorite horror stuff down below, what you're looking forward to this year. Another thing I did want to mention for Scary Stories, again, being a bigger fan of the technical aspects on the script itself, the composer did something very similar that was done in Steve Jobs, the movie, which I really love, and that's that they switched up the score in between the short story segments, so, at least they were in the mindset of doing it kind of like an anthology. I thought that was pretty cool if you pay attention to it. I also really did like this scene right here.
Is there a problem with your dessert?
Yes, there's a fucking problem. I don't want apple. I don't want fucking ice cream. I want arroz con leche. Do you have that? What about pan dulce? Do you have that? ¿Qué tal un pinche flan? Do you have that?
One of the very few scenes I've gone back to in Culture Shock, and that's mainly because, you ever been to a gluten-free restaurant? They have the audacity to hand you that dessert menu? Nah, get that away from me. Other than that, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Any horror movies that you're looking forward to, let me know. Other than that, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll make sure Sarah Bellows doesn't write your ending.